This is for you if you're somebody who's struggling to lose weight and you're also trying to add more plant-based foods into your diet so that you would have a better health. So a little bit of my backstory. My name is JJ. I have helped almost 70 people lose 10 to 20 pounds and be able to keep it off with a mostly plant-based diet. And a little bit of my backstory. I've been on this diet for almost 6 years, and my biggest mistake, and that's what's gonna be the topic of this video, is why is it so difficult to lose weight in 2025? Because it's already 2025. Most of us already know that, like, yeah, you have to eat less, you have to move more, calorie deficit is the way to go. Yes, everybody knows you have to eat less calories than you need. And yet, why are there like 2/3 of Americans who are still overweight or obese? It's not that simple. So, going back to my story, what I did 6 years ago was I tried to count calories, get in a 500 calorie deficit to be losing at least a pound a week. And that worked. But by the end of that, after 4 months, once I reached my goal, I developed an eating disorder. Why? Because of two factors. What I have figured out is one is hunger, which is the most important factor why most diets fail, and second is nutrition. So what was I doing back then? 500 calorie deficit, reducing the size of my portions, that increased my hunger. So every single day I had constant hunger. I had to be drinking water. I remember I was even placing flavor drops into water and drinking so much so that I could quote unquote mask my hunger, but it never disappeared. And then once my dieting phase ended, all of that hunger came back, and that's why I started binging on food. And most of you guys can probably relate with that as well. And then the second thing is restrictions. So if you cut out your favorite foods, or let's say carbohydrates, which is really prevalent these days, trying to say, hey, you have to be eating a low carb diet to see results. If you cut that out, then what happens is most people can stick to that for a few months, for 2 months, for 3 months, for 4 months, maybe max for half a year, maybe for a year. I've heard some people were able to stick to that for a year, but even so, afterwards, you cannot sustain that. You're like, hey, I have to go out to eat. I'm going out on vacation. My family comes into town. Sounds familiar? And then what happens? Your diet goes out of the window. You start eating all of that food back. You start binging on that, and the weight goes back up. So that was my experience, was that I was really hungry and I was restricting my favorite foods, and that's why my diet failed. So that's why in 2025, just because you're trying to do a calorie deficit, it still doesn't guarantee weight loss. So let me tell you this. 3 most popular methods to still lose weight on this day. What people do. People try to do portion control. People try to count calories, and people try to follow these fad diets. I'm not gonna say intermittent fasting is a fad, but I'm gonna say that keto is definitely a fad. So let's try to tackle them one by one. Portion control. What you do is the same thing basically as counting calories. You eat an X amount of food and then you try to limit it so that you would get in a calorie deficit. Well, what happens is that your body is not that stupid. It's gonna catch up really quickly. You're like, okay, well, you used to feed me this amount of food and now you're not doing that anymore. What we're gonna do is we're gonna increase the hunger. Hunger goes up, day by day, and you cannot stick to that anymore because you cannot just be restricting the calories forever. Same thing that, you could go eat McDonald's, you could go eat French fries and just eat less of that and get in a calorie deficit, but it's not gonna work because it's not the quality food. So basically that just covers portion control, calorie counting. Now going to intermittent fasting, a lot of people try to follow that. Hey, that's great. If you wake up, you're not hungry, you don't want to eat breakfast, you can skip that. It's all good. But you have to understand it this way, that let's say you shorten the window of eating to 8 hours and then for 16 hours you're not eating. Most people complain to me that they become too hungry. For 16 hours of not eating, they become really hungry, so that when they have to eat in that 8 hour period, let's say it's 2 meals or 3 meals or 4 meals, like whatever, chances are really high that when you are really hungry, you're gonna start eating big portions, big meals, and then it's gonna increase the calories and the weight is not gonna go down. And again, it's like when family comes into town, when you decide to go out to eat, when you go on vacation, it's also not gonna be very sustainable. And the last but not least is keto. We all know that it doesn't work. If you cut out carbs, you're not gonna have enough energy. You're gonna be feeling like crap. If you cannot include fruits or vegetables, you're gonna develop nutrient deficiencies, and it just doesn't work. So we all know that. So what is actually the solution? The solution is the PBM method that I have created. Basically, what it allows for you to do is that instead of just trying to restrict the portions, what we do is we increase the portion sizes, but it has to be the right foods. So it's not that like, hey, you can go eat anything you want, you can eat 2 pounds of rice and French fries and go out to eat all the time and be eating processed stuff. Of course, it's not gonna work that way. It has to be the right foods 80-90% of the time, and then 10% of the time. So basically, going back, when you eat the right foods 90% of the time, what it's gonna do is it's gonna have you intaking bigger portions. So what happens to the hunger? The hunger goes out of the window. You when you're dieting, when you're losing fat, you are supposed to be feeling just a little bit hungry. A little bit of hunger means it's okay. It means that your body is understanding that it's releasing body fat. But if you're feeling constantly hungry every day, it's not gonna work. So that's what we solve by having bigger portions of the right foods. And what are the right foods? Well, I cannot just say, broccoli, asparagus, and lettuce, because for each person, it's gonna be different. Each person has different dietary requirements. We have different food preferences. So I cannot say a one size fits all approach. And then the second thing, that's 90% of the time when you have the bigger portions of the right foods. And then 10% of the time, when you decide to go out to eat, when you go on vacation, you still have that flexibility to include that bad food, and you're still gonna be okay. Because as long as we're able to take care of majority of nutrition, you can still enjoy some of the processed stuff. And then what happens, it doesn't feel like a diet anymore. Then you're like, okay, my family comes into town, I'm going on vacation, I'm not feeling that restricted, I'm not feeling hungry. And that's when we don't call it a diet, we call it as a lifestyle change. We call it as a healthy habits that you can keep doing day in, day out, and sustain that for the rest of your life. So you're probably asking, well, JJ, what are gonna be the right foods? What are gonna be the proper protein, fat, and calories, and all of that stuff? Well, you can go on Google, you can try to Google it up. That's the first option. Or second option, if you want to get the best results, if you want to have all of that taken care of, from somebody who's done it himself and who has helped over 70 people do the same thing, then what you can do is you can shoot me a message on Instagram at PBM Coach, or you can book a call below. It's just a 15-minute call. There's no pressure. I have nothing to push there, I'm just gonna ask you a few questions about your fitness and see what advice I can provide for you. And worst case scenario, you're gonna have more clarity in terms of what to do. So if this was helpful, don't forget to like and share, and I'll see you in the next video.